Let's have a sesh on quality assurance, QA. So QA is when systems are used to prevent defects from occurring. Now these systems could be that you use process checklists or documentation. You create this documentation on the best way to build this product, or you have certain checklists, tick boxes that you tick along the way so you know exactly the order and the correct way to build the product in. And then when you're building it, when you're in the production process, you adhere to this documentation. That is effectively QA. Because if you follow that documentation that you designed, the best way to do it, then theoretically you prevent defects. But QA is often used in tandem with QC because with all the documentation and all the systems you can put in place, all the QA systems you can put in place, ultimately that's just trying to prevent the defects, and there could still be defects that occur. Hence you use it in combination with QC because QC is at the end of the production process and will help you identify any defects that manage to squeeze out. And remember, QC is about the detection and then rejection of those final goods so they don't get to that end customer, the external customer. Now, QC, QA, we need to remind ourselves of why we do this. We do this because we don't want to have poor quality products. We don't want our customers to have poor quality products because that means defects, it means wastage costs, it means higher cost of production, it means because we've got higher cost of production, we might need to increase our final price to help keep that profit margin at the same place, and that's going to reduce our business's competitiveness. Now, there's advantages to QA. The first one is that QA, if you do these process checklists or if you do this documentation and you adhere to it, well, that's going to lead to lower defects. Lower defects, less waste, less production costs, the ability for you to reduce the price and therefore become more competitive. So basically the opposite of that. The second advantage of QA is that you're going to have less defects over time if you follow it, and therefore you're going to improve your reputation and your long-term sales should theoretically increase because you've become a standard for quality. The third thing is that with QA, well, you're going to need to have to design these checklists, design this documentation for you to follow. So if you make someone responsible for that or a team responsible for that, well, they're more involved within the quality process and they might be, as a consequence of that, more motivated. And we know the great benefits of motivation, being improved staff retention or improved productivity. But there's disadvantages to quality assurance. The first is it costs. It's not free because you need to design these processes, design these systems. Also, you might need to pay workers. If you're going to go through this route, you need to pay them to have the skill set to be able to design documentation to prevent defects. And more than designing just the documentation, these systems as it were, you then, once they're built, need to train the workers on the production line how to use them. How do they do these documentation? How do they follow these checklists? So there's lots of costs involved within that. Training costs, of course, being the main one. And the second disadvantage of QA is that to follow a QA process, well, it's going to slow down the production process. It might be that you need to tick all these boxes as you're going along your build of whatever it is you're building, and that could slow down the speed that you build it in. Of course, it's trying to mitigate against the quality issues, but it's certainly going to slow down the process, and that could lead to less productivity, and that could be a problem. And the final thing is that while we've said here that it could be more motivating to try and get employees more involved in the quality process, well, that's not always the case. It depends on each business. Because it could actually just lead to resistance. It might be that workers are not interested. They don't want to be involved and have more responsibility now beyond their own personal and individual job that they're originally doing. So it might lead to resistance now that they need to be involved in this process, and that could be demotivated and have the completely opposite effects that we've said here. The last thing to think about is that we've looked at QC, that is identifying defects. We've looked at QA, which is preventing it through building systems. The last thing is that, well, you could still get defects out of this. And there's one higher level, one higher state that you could aim to be at, and that is TQM. And TQM is basically a philosophy within the business that you will strive for no defects, absolutely none. And the idea within that is that you would have a customer, not just only the external customer that buys the product, but you will have a customer who is internal to the business in some cases because it's the next person or next team in the production line to you. So it might be you do the first step and then you pass it to the next person in the production line. Well, they're your customer. You're responsible to them. So if every person has the TQM philosophy, total quality management philosophy, and everyone's built into that, then theoretically it builds this kind of utopian world or business where you have zero defects, which is what TQM aims at. For more details on that, click the card up there. But for now, we've just focused on QA, and don't forget there's also a video on QC, so you can really nail it down before you get to your exams. I'll see you at the next sesh.